three elements: nutrition, water, and development. I thought I was missing energy in there, because I can imagine that the production of food, the processing, the transportation would use a lot of energy. So that's just an observation. And then another observation is you have an advisory board of, if I counted correctly, 13 people. And then, if I counted correctly, one woman in there. Now, you were pointing out several times that women are one of your key target groups and market. Do you feel that in most of your markets the representation of 1 to 13 is, or 1 to 12 is adjusted?
Let's start with the second one. It is a little bit a reflection. We didn't take so much the people, we took the institutions. And as you can see, if you look at the heads of the institutions, in most cases you still have men. Now I can give you a good news. We have just been able to convince a lady from Africa to join the group. So we are going to have a little bit better, but we will have one more lady in the group. So we are working on
2 out of 14.
Well, anyway, it's better than 1 out of 13. So the first question was about fuel, no doubt about it. Now, I didn't go too much in the whole question of water, which is very close to my mind and to my heart. But of course, fuel and food are the big issues for the future in this world. And the one thing that combines the two things is unfortunately water. You need 1 liter water to produce 1 calorie for the food production. If you take it from grain, you take 10 liters of water in order to produce 1 calorie if it is from animal. So as we are drinking 5 liters of water, and we have a minimum hygiene of 20 liters, let's say a minimum hygiene of 20 liters, 25 liters, well, we are eating somewhere between 3,000 to 6,000, 6,500 liters of water. Okay? So the real issue is the water usage is in the area of this side. Now, on the other hand, that's also important to understand, oil production is incredibly intensive in water usage. Today we have about 1 liter of water for 1 liter of oil. The future is going to be even worse, because in order to be able to get the oil sands out of the ground, oil sands is nothing else as what you see normally when a tanker, unfortunately, puts a lot of petroleum on the beaches. Okay, those are oil sands. Now they are sticky and they stick to the rocks and to the things. So in order to get those oil sands out, you have to steam up the whole area, which of course is extremely high in water consumption. But when you steam, and we are talking here about huge regions, you steam this down very deep so that the oil becomes liquid. But when you do that, the oil of course goes sidewards. So what you have to do is you have to freeze the walls of the area that you want to steam, and again you need enormous amount of water. So in the future, most probably, the water consumption will be about 10 liters water for 1 liter of oil, at least. Okay? And this shows you immediately that the one reserve that we have, the most precious one, and the one that is really the one we are already today overusing, is going to be, there will be a fight both from the energy side as well as from the food side. Now the energy market is 20 times in calorie, because a calorie is a calorie is a calorie. Whether we eat it or we put it in a car, it's the same calorie. Okay? Doesn't change. We should never forget that. The energy market is 20 times the food market. Okay? Which brings you to another very interesting question. The whole biofuel question. Okay? Our politicians want us to replace between 10 and 20% of the fuel, of the energy calorie, through food calories. Okay? Now, you don't have to be a university graduate. If the energy market is 20 times bigger than the food market, and you want to replace about 20%, you would have to triple the food production of the world in order to be able to produce a biofuel that they want us to produce. Triple the food production. And we have today already problems to think how we are going to assure the food supply for the increasing population. It shows you, I mean, how little has been thought about when those political decisions are being made. So water and fuel and food is going to be these three most important things. Food supply, fuel supply, and unfortunately water is the link between the two. And how we are able to combine this will be a biggest challenge that we have.
I'm Regina Birner from IFPRI, in charge of our research program on governance for agriculture and rural development. Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation, very impressive examples, and certainly very much to see about your leadership in this field. I have two questions. One relates to your pyramid. In your pyramid, where the shared value is at the top, at the bottom you have the compliance, and you somehow glanced over it. That's kind of the bottom thing we do anyway. But looking at the history of your company, it seems that in the compliance in one field that's actually quite close to IFPRI's heart on child nutrition and breastfeeding, there have been compliance issues for actually many years. And not only is that a concern of the NGO community, that also has been a concern in the profession. For example, in 2003, there was an article in the British Medical Journal based on a survey that found violations in West Africa. And you may argue maybe it's difficult to control what happens in every country, and that is also some years ago. But I noted that even in 2009, US FDA censored Nestlé for marketing children's juice boxes as medical food. So apparently there is an issue with compliance, which is at the bottom of your pyramid. Maybe you can explain a bit more on how your company deals with that issue. And that leads me to a related question. I think the kind of winning idea of the shared value concept is that you create a benefit for your company and your shareholders at the same time for society. But I think there is a need to acknowledge that there are also issues where there is a clear trade-off, where value for society does not necessarily or simply cannot be translated into profit for your company. And I think this compliance issue I just mentioned, like the infant marketing of breast milk substitutes, is exactly such an issue where you clearly have a trade-off. And by focusing on the shared value that has the benefit for your company and society, the question is how you actually deal with those areas that are also very important, where this win-win situation does not exist.
Very clearly at the bottom of the pyramid, there is this compliance issue. There's no doubt about it. And I think this is something that we take very, very serious. I mean, without any doubt, that's why it is there. Otherwise, we wouldn't even have put it there. We would have said, look, everything is creating shared value and that's it, and therefore we are doing fine. Compliance is important. Compliance is something that is we are completely committed to. As a matter of fact, if you look into our report, it's not only an issue of management, it's an issue of the board. We have a compliance manager who is independent and who reports directly to the audit committee of the board of directors. And we have also outside supervisors. We are using companies like Veritas, like other companies, which are controlling the compliance of our organizations in the world. The issue of WHO, I would say, is in most of the cases an issue of interpretation more than of compliance, frankly speaking. If you look at the code of WHO, it is very clearly a code that prohibits advertising for breastfeeding. It clearly points out that we should be defending breastfeeding as the best and most suitable way of feeding a child, and we are doing that. Where we are getting into some interpretation issues, which was, for example, in the last time when we were being the 2003 report, was that it was considered that when we are talking and we are doing advertising for Nido, for example, which is a milk for children of 1 year upwards, that this is not complying with the WH code. But the WH code talks about breastfeed substitutes and not about milk products. Or, for example, cereals, weaning cereals, and things like this. So in most of the cases, it's more an interpretation issue that we have with one of the activist groups. But it can happen, and this has happened also in the past, that one or the other has not complied 100%. We are a human company, we are 280,000 people, it can happen. What I can assure you is that every single of accusation that we receive is being picked up, is being followed up, is being verified, and if there was a violation, people have left the company very clearly. We have a strong commitment to this. Now, the second question you asked was more the question about, yes, on the area that we have been focusing on, but what about the rest? When you have when you have to make a decision, either shareholder value or, well, if you carefully listened, the basic idea about this one here was really to identify the areas where you can optimize, and then where you're focusing in this part of it. I agree with you. There will always be areas where you would have say, well, I have perhaps to make a decision that is not against community, because if you're working against, you're out anyway, frankly speaking, in today's world. But where we do not optimize so much in different other areas. But the good thing is that if you look at the total value creation that you do, by concentrating on those areas which are in our value chain, take the biggest part of the block. The value chain is the amount of cost that you have, the amount of between cost and price that you create. The biggest area of this is included in these three areas. And therefore, by concentrating on this, we are really optimizing the creation of shared value for shareholders and for the society. That's why it is so important that the company makes the works with outside people in order to identify where are those areas where you can really do the most. That's basically.
Thank you very much. Excellent presentation. My name is Antonio Galloso, and I'm currently a professor of microfinance at George Washington University, but I spent 30 years in developing agencies. In looking at the Deer Park bottle, it reminded me of the fact that in developed countries we don't need bottled water, and yet a lot of people are complaining that it has a very negative impact on both environment and society, uses of fuel, for example. But beyond that, but related, in your opinion, what should be, or how strong should be the role of government in stimulating and regulating companies in terms of their social behavior?
I think there were two different questions again. One question is a famous question about the water bottle. I just was thinking about what happened just a week ago, or what happened 3 weeks ago in Haiti. And if you ask people the first thing what they need, and when I saw your former president, the first thing what he did, what was it? He brought bottled water to the people because otherwise they would be dying. In Haiti, in Chile, the first thing, and what is still happening today. Okay, so I mean it's very easy to say, you know, we don't need bottled water. Funny enough, each time you have a problem, the first thing that people need and the most important thing is bottled water, because that's the way how they can live. Second issue is, I hear all the time, I mean, how can you defend? I can have 1 liter of water coming out of my tap. Okay, this cost me about 10 centimes, and I should pay 1 Swiss francs or $1 for this one here. Okay, it doesn't cost you $1; it costs 50 cents. Okay, 50 times more. Depends where you buy it. Let's say that's even $1. Now, the interesting thing is, have you ever thought about that for you to have the opportunity to get this 1 liter of water out of your tap, society has to produce in the US about 450 liters of water for you to be able to use 1 liter of water. Okay? And the rest you're using for your toilet, for your washing machine, for your car, for all the other things what you're using for. So don't compare the liter of water which you will receive here, which is 1 liter of water, which is absolutely usable for you, with the 600 liters, 450 to 600 liters of water which have been produced, so that you can take 1 liter of water out of this thing. Where you're losing, by the way, 35% as an average in insufficient infrastructures in Europe, and 70% in developing worlds. Okay, 70% in developing worlds is being used through infrastructure which is not working well, and in Europe, I have the European figure, it's 30%. Here in Washington, and as we are in Washington now, because you would think that in Washington you shouldn't be able to talk about this problem. If you would go to the internet, you will see that in Washington D.C. a political decision was taken not to spend $124 million to change the water pipelines from Washington, which are still 100-year-old, plumbed. You know why it is called plumbing, the whole business, okay? Because basically it's a lead thing. And although it is clear that all water is being heavily contaminated with lead, the decision was taken not to make the investment of $124 million in order to put the water pipes up to date in Washington, D.C. Okay? And it's in the internet. You can see that thing in the internet.
The best brand is Eau de Potomac.
Okay? So I think on this issue about water and bottling water, there is always a half-truth about it, because people do not really understand what it really costs and what the real costs are behind a liter of fresh water, good water coming out of a tap, and compare that very simply and saying, I pay for this and I pay for this, and therefore this is not justifiable. So that's on the water side. What I think is important on the water side, first of all, it is still the most efficient way to get water. If you would we need about half a liter of water to produce 1 liter of water, okay? If you would have, let's say, a carbonated soft drink, you need 3 liters of water to produce 1 liter of the drink. If you go to beer, you need 6 to 7 liters of water to produce 1 liter of this. So if you want to hydrate yourself in the most efficient way, it is drinking bottled water. Okay? Now, what was the second question was the regulation. Should governments introduce regulations?
How strong?
Huh? How strong? Well, I think, first of all, governments are regulating every single day. Very interesting. When the Exxon, you remember the Exxon case? Not so long ago, no? Government regulated, in the US, 9,000 pages of additional regulation after the Exxon case, and created a compliant society. Okay? What was the outcome? We went into the biggest financial crisis ever run, with all the regulations, with all the things. You will never be able to regulate good behavior. You have to have solid principles. You have to have, basically, with the 10 principles of Jesus, if everybody would just comply with those, we would have a different world. Okay? You will never be able to regulate everything. What we really have to have is a much more value-driven society, not a regulation-driven society. That's the biggest mistake of politicians. But of course, as a politician, you make yourself a better name when you said, this law is under my things, and the Salmon-Oxley law, and then, of course, they stay for history. They made this great regulation and protected the future investors and things like that. I haven't seen any protection coming out of this. They still have lost a lot of money. It would have been much better to come back to the fundamental values and instill the values into society and into the business and into the business leaders. I think that would be much better. Talking more and demanding more to have good principles and good values instead of having too much regulation.
Which, by the way, do not necessarily have to be Christian values. You were the next one.
Hi. I'm Sue Schramm with ACDI VOCA, and we're a large international development company that works around the world in over 40 countries. I'm here with a couple of my colleagues who are part of your cocoa partnerships. One big area of our partnership, we work in conjunction with the World Cocoa Foundation, another colleague over here. And I think the concept of shared value that you've presented here is just excellent, and I think it's the only way to go. And I have many colleagues all around the country in companies who are like-minded, and we talk about this all the time and what a great concept it is. However, we find it's a little difficult to get from the reality of where we are right now to the actual concept of shared value due to many, many things. Quite a bit of cultural difference between the way a company operates and the way the development industry operates, for example. Different motivations, lack of understanding sometimes in the domestic companies about international development and what it actually does, and so on. So I'm about to go over to the Corporate Council of Africa, actually, to work on some strategic planning activities about getting more corporations involved in our activities. So I would like to hear from you what you think some of the obstacles are. Your positive presentation was very inspiring, but what are some of the obstacles that you have run into, and how can we come together as development people and corporate people to best solve those issues so that we can move forward to shared value?
Well, thank you very much for this very creative and constructive remark. There is no doubt. I mean, if you know both worlds, the development world and the business world, there is a big difference. There's no doubt about this. A difference that I think we will try to bridge, because that's all about what we are talking here about. But you also pointed out to another thing. And this is the interpretation on both sides again. While at my advisory board, we can come, and we will come one day perhaps, to a better understanding of each other, because I must say I'm quite open. The first meeting showed us big differences, not only between the corporate world, but also between the different institutions of the development world. Not each one of these NGOs and institutions and things, I mean, have the same cultural background and values. Okay, so it's not only between corporate, but also it's between all of us. I mean, so this will take time. More complicated is it afterwards to get it through the organization down on the local level. You see, even in our organization, when I'm talking about creating shared value, I know very well that in the 280,000 people out there, there are still many interpretations about what creating shared value really is. And this is one of the reasons why we are webcasting this session to all of our people, the 280,000 people of Nestlé. Because I want them to hear me. I want them to hear me not in front of them. I want me to hear them in front of you, because then they know what I'm saying here is serious. And this is one way how I try to overcome and to help that we have the same concept in the organization and that the same message goes down to the operational level. Then it will become easier for them to work with your people on the ground, and they will have the same understanding. That's the way we're trying.
My name is Dana Dalrymple. I'm a recent retiree from U.S. Department of Agriculture and USAID. When I saw the note about your meeting, I assumed that at some point you'd be talking about improving the quality of foods and diets. I didn't hear much of that, but then when I looked at the printed report, I found that you had a substantial section on that, and I certainly wish to compliment you on that. And it goes on to cover points of reducing trans fatty acids, salt, sugar, saturated fat. Another thing I learned, much to my surprise, is that I'm a steady consumer of one of your items. this happens to be lean cuisine, and I noticed
You're not really
I'm a bachelor now.
you're not really the target group. I mean,
Well,
I would rather see you with macaroni with cheese. Good homemade stove food.
well, yeah, but yes, I still have a concern though on the nutrition side. I'm pleased to see that the goal is to reduce levels of salt and sugar in the products, and I noticed on the label for one of my favorite items, which is sesame chicken, the level for salt is still pretty high. It's 680 milligrams, 28% of the daily diet. This seems to be a common characteristic of frozen foods. I don't know that you're any higher than anybody else, but it would seem to me that one could possibly get by with less salt, but there may be reasons for that. Undoubtedly, you've conducted tests with consumers and whatnot to find out what they feel about it. But it might not be, or it might be useful for you to say a little bit about your
Absolutely.
Nutritional quality activities.
Thank you very much. Well, the good thing is you were able to tell me how much salt we still have in lean cuisine. That means we are transparent about it. And I think transparency is the first most important step towards improving. So that's for me already a good sign, you see. We are not trying to hide, we are not trying to cheat, we are saying that's what it is. Now we'll try to do our best in order to improve further on. I've given my organization a tool, a working tool, which we call 60-40 plus. Now 60-40 means that all of our products should have a better taste in a blind consumer test of 60-40 preference, so that they taste better. But that's not enough. The plus stands that each one of our products has to have a better nutritional profile than the one of my competitors. So that's the first tool. And those two things are basically the driving force for our research and development. Constantly checking that the profile is better, the nutrition profile is better. Through this experience, we have eliminated 200,000 tons of sugar per year and 5,000 tons of salt from our product. Now, have we done enough? Do we need to do more? Absolutely, no doubt. But when you look at the acceptance level, because it cannot be only you take sugar out and then nobody eats the product anymore because it doesn't taste. So what you're doing is you start to bring more and more salt out of the product, people getting accustomed to lower salt levels, and then you can go the next step and next step and next step. Because otherwise, you have a big plus, but you don't have a product that the consumers want anymore. So that's a way. Excuse me. That's a way how we balance this out. The other thing is, big question, very interesting question. Again, in this forum here, I'm absolutely sure, it's a question about micronutrients and macronutrients, and what should have preference. If you go back, for example, into the 60s, the big question was more on the macronutrients. Proteins question about, have people enough proteins to get into this? Very interesting was that at that time there was another, thinking about your question first, there was another bridge between food and fuel. We had, together with Exxon, we had a big research project how we could take proteins out of oil. Because at that time already, the question was whether we would be able to produce enough protein for human consumption. And then Norman Borlaug came in, and he started the big green revolution, and this problem was overcome. But don't forget, before Norman Borlaug, we were not sure that we would find enough proteins for human consumption in the thing. So macronutrient against micronutrient. Today, most of the people are more worried about the micronutrient, the deficiencies. And in this report, again, you see what we're doing on micronutrients. And I talked about it a little bit. Of course, I could have gone into more depths. The interesting thing with the micronutrients is, of course, that the demand is completely different depending on where you're going. If you're talking, for example, in Latin America, you will see that iron is a very important a micronutrient which is missing. And in Asia, for example, the most important one would be vitamin A. Vitamin A is the cause of the lack of vitamin A is the cause for children blindness in an enormous amount. And therefore, we are working very, very hardly, for example, in the Asian area with fortification of vitamin A, for example. But you have to understand, you have to go down into each country in order to understand what is the micronutrient deficiencies, and then afterwards develop products which are specifically for this consumer. You cannot just say, worldwide, okay, we are going to fortify all products with vitamin C, and with this we have done. That's not enough. So nutrition plays a very important role, and that's the reason why I said it's one of the 3 pillars that we have.
I think just to mention that IFPRI, together with CIAT, has a big project on biofortification, so bringing micronutrients into plants and staple crops, especially that are eaten by poor populations.
Thank you very much. I'm Werner Kiene with the World Bank. Thank you for this inspiring presentation and how corporate social responsibility principles or standards are being enriched through this. My question would be a little bit in line with Sue. Where is this going across the board? Are these principles now being seriously influenced? And is this an industry or global trend that you're starting? And what needs to be done by the public institutions to support you in something which is quite valuable?
Yeah, I think, as you can imagine, I mean, we have started to develop this concept. We have been propagating it into many institutions. We are working, I think, the whole work that has been done last year, for example, in this UN forum. The fact that it was a UN event and that it was webcasted worldwide really brought a big attention level. And I must say, I'm very pleased that in the 2009 shareholder reports, which the one I have seen up to now, 2 of my main competitors have already included creating shared value as a concept that they're also embracing. So I think in the industry-wide, it starts to be being accepted. I think in the area, for example, on the World Economic Forum, where I had the opportunity to present the concept to my colleagues, in general terms, most of my colleagues are quite happy with it because it gives them an answer to this confrontation that we have many times, not only from I would say from the NGO level side or from the development, how you want to call it better, group side, but from our shareholder side. I mean, there were shareholders meeting where people were standing up and saying, you are not allowed to spend so much in this charity and so much. It's my money. Why the hell are you feeling you give this money away? If I want to give it away, I will give it away. But you, because you want to have your name on the door of an opera house, and therefore you are spending 10 million of shareholders' money. Don't underestimate this. I mean, hedge funds and they are the most private equity. They have no understanding if you are spending their money, in charitable things in order to make for yourself a nice plaque or something. Okay, so that's what the attractive part of it is for many of my colleagues. That you can say, well, wait a moment, we are making those investments because they will also help to create shareholder value. And not in the feeling of, as I said before, that yes, with this I have a better consciousness or something like this. No, it will create real value. That's the important part of it.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm Guillaume Groer from IFPRI. I'm a researcher here in the Science and Technology group. And so I was really interested in your presentation. And one of the piece of work, we do work a lot on biotechnology and GMOs. I'm sorry to get back to controversy here. No. But one of the paper we work on, I think it was last year was published, was showing that the policy of food companies in Europe, that avoid GMOs because consumers don't want it there, are actually very influential in countries of Africa where they are still developing their policies around the testing of potential GMOs that could be, in some cases, beneficial for them in the future. So I know you've been a little open in this question. I mean, at least in the press, I've seen that, rather than other people in Europe, you're open to the issue. I wanted to know if this GM-free policy that you probably have in place is set in stone, or do you see that evolving over time, knowing that it has such influence on developing countries? Thank you.
Yeah, I think to say that I was a little bit more open, I think it's an understatement. As a matter of fact, I have Greenpeace climbing our walls outside in protest against our not having, for them, a strong enough stance in favor of GMO-free. I personally am absolutely convinced that we will not be able to feed the world if we are not moving forward with new technologies. And I think the signs are already on the wall. If you look at the productivity growth in agriculture, which has come down enormously over the last couple of years, it's because we are not using new technology which is already available. Just by using new technologies, we would be able again to have productivity growth, agricultural productivity growth that would be bigger than population growth, and with this we would have a big problem. Secondly, and I think here it comes also the whole question about arable land and erosion, which I mentioned before. GMO will allow you to use land which is today not really agricultural land, whether it's too saline or whether it's too dry. So there are a lot of solutions in this area which I am convinced we will need. So, and the third thing is that up to now, and this is now, you know that better than me, quite many years, nobody has been dying of a GMO product, and many have been dying of what they call organic products, okay? Which is also a truth, because very clearly an organic product is much more exposed to toxic and than, for example, a GMO product, okay? So from a health point of view, I don't agree at all. Now, I happen to be the advisor to the Austrian Chancellor, and Austria is one of those countries which is absolutely, green to its bones. And so the Chancellor also was absolutely against GMO. So I told him, I said, with due respect, I understand, but you should be consequent as a politician, if this is really what you believe. And consequent would mean that, first of all, you should prohibit that biotechnology is being taught at our universities, because I cannot understand that we are spending money to teach young people a profession which then afterwards they are not allowed to execute in its home country, and I don't think we have so much money for that. Okay? So that's the first thing if you want to be coherent. The second one, I said, I have seen you imposing on the cigarettes a big sticker on top of it, which said smoking is deadly and things like this. I think you should be consequent if you believe that there's a real health issue with GMO, that on every sticker, on every flight ticket to the United States or to any other country where they have been using GMO for 15 years, you put a big stick on top of it. You should be aware you go to a country where you are going to eat GMO-produced products. Okay? That would be coherent. It's ridiculous. But you have to understand, now turn the whole thing around. In Europe, the agricultural system is based on subsidies. Well, the US also, but different anyway. But in Europe, okay, we are paying basically not to produce. So if you're a farmer and for 2 years you do not use your land, but this means That you don't tilt it, you don't produce anything on it. Okay, you don't allow to go a sheep on it, you don't allow a cow on it. You will get a subsidy as if you have produced wheat on this thing. Okay, now come somebody and say, I'm going to increase the yield per hectare. I want to have 0 yield, and you want to increase the yield per hectare. Doesn't sound very interesting to me. Therefore, the farmers have no interest in Europe either. And that's where it really starts. Until the farmers really have an interest, GMO will not be in Europe. It's very clear.